All right, so we are going to talk about language acquisition or a LAP plan today. This presentation was shared with me by Carrie Whipple. She does a lot with ELLs in both North Dakota and South Dakota, and so she said that was fine if I shared this with you. So, language acquisition plans, I'm going to go full screen so you can see this better. Language acquisition plans, or again, they're called LAP plans, are kind of like what an IEP is for a SPED student. So kids in special ed, we know, get their own IEP where it writes down the goals and things like that. Well, kids in ELL should also have their own plan. And we are going to go over some of the components that should be within that plan today. So the language support team should be in there. It should include the mainstream or content classroom teacher, the ELL teacher, the parents or guardians, administrator, or if they designate somebody else, and the student if appropriate. If students are old enough, it's nice to have them involved because it sort of lets them see everybody rooting for them in their corner and allows them to talk about the progress that they've made, goals coming up. So if they're old enough to understand that, and really, I feel like I try to always include students. I even included students as young as first grade because it's all about them. So I feel like if there's not going to be any conversation that you maybe wouldn't want them to hear, they should probably be a part of that team. And then just general demographics, their name, grade, birth date, where they were born, when they came to the U.S., parent contact information, and then how do they want to be communicated with, telephone, letters, and then also when you do send home written communication, what language do they want that in? Their academic history, have they been in school before? What was the last grade that they completed? The number of years that they missed, or if there was interrupted schooling. Maybe they went in kindergarten and first grade and then they were moved to a refugee camp where they missed the next 2 years. That's really important to know. Academic achievement information, what kind of grades did they get in their home country? And then any special programs. Language assessment at the top, you see for the WAPT, remember that the WAPT is not nearly as good of a test as the kindergarten model or the model test, but always include, if they were screened in your school, include that data if you have it, and then also record their access each year so that you can get more of that longitudinal look of here's where they were in first grade with their reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Here's where they are in second, third, fourth. It's nice to see that growth and progression along the way. What instructional program are you using? Is there a certain program model? How many minutes per day and times per week are they being met with? Name and qualifications of the service provider. So everybody that I served, I signed my name in their LAP plan and then put how much service time they got and how I was serving them. And then expected graduation date. You can do the expected graduation date, but I would advise not to do the date of exit because you're kind of just throwing out a guess. And I feel like if you're off with that guess, it can be frustrating if that kind of becomes the expectation. So expected graduation date, but I wouldn't guess at when they're going to exit the ELL program necessarily. And I know Carrie Whipple would also agree with that. Then accommodations and assessment. You can organize this by summative and formative. They should be used in the daily assessment so that kids are familiar with them, before the high stakes testing. So I'm not going to say that a student should get the test read aloud when in the classroom, when they take tests, they've never had this test read aloud. What you can only give accommodations to them on the high stakes test, which now would be Smarter Balance, if they're getting those same accommodations already in their classroom. So you really need to be thinking about this at the very beginning of the year, or after you get to know the student a little bit, because you can't just say right before the high stakes test, I'm going to give them all these accommodations when it's something that they have not had before. So instructional methods in the regular classroom, these are all different like strategies or things that they can use in their regular classroom. So like using print instead of cursive, paraphrasing or repeating directions, personal cueing, any of these that you think that will be really good for the student that you're working with, mark and then share this, just like a SPED teacher would share the IEP with the classroom teacher. ELL teachers need to share this with the classroom teachers as well. And then objectives, usually they go by the can-do descriptors. So if you would look at a student and you see on their access test that they are a ELP, English Language Proficiency, level 3, then you might hope by next year they're a level 4 or a level 5. So you'll look in that language domain at what can they do at that level, and then those become your objectives. Where do we want them to be next year? What do we want them to be doing? Instead of pointing and identifying pictures, they can speak in short phrases, and just use that can-do descriptor chart to kind of guide your decisions here. And then signatures. One thing that's different about these compared to an IEP is an IEP meeting, everybody comes, they sit down around the table, and they work through this. This is not that way. People on these teams just kind of look over the information. So I would write up the LAP plan, and then I might go over it with the classroom teacher, send it to the principal, go over it with the parent, and all of these people will sign it. And that doesn't need to be a big formal meeting, especially if you have a lot of students in your school. So I'm thinking we had over 100 students who were ELL in my previous school that I worked at. So it just would not be feasible to have big sit-down meetings with all of those people involved. And that is sort of it. Your LAP plan, there is no specified way that it has to be done, but I've included a template that has these same components within it, and this will give you a good start so that when you make a LAP plan for a student, you kind of know what you should be putting in there. But don't think that it has to be done exactly this way, because it does not. So I hope you learned a little bit about what a LAP plan is and some of the components that should be in your LAP plan.